Hi, hello, good morning, it's Mari again, and this is part 2 to how I learned to make a VTuber in 7 days. Now you can watch part 1 to catch up, or as a very brief summary, the title is kind of self-explanatory. I gave myself 7 days to learn how to make a VTuber model. I broke the week up into 2 parts to make it easier for myself and used the first 3 days to draw a model and then the next 4 to rig the model. Except I didn't! Things didn't go to plan, and I have a day and a half to learn how to rig. So, keep me in your prayers, please. Thank you! Continuing where we left off in the last video, the second half of day 6 was the start of the part that I dreaded the most. I looked into getting a live 2D cubism for a month, which turns out it's not a monthly but a yearly subscription, and it's a little out of my budget right now. Thankfully, it does come with a 42-day pro trial, which should be plenty of time considering I'm only giving myself a day and a half for this. I could use the free version, but I know that it has some limitations to it, which I've come to understand a lot better now after using the program, but I'll get into those a little bit later. Regardless though, we're done installing it and it's time. After getting flashbang, the first thing I did was obviously think I somehow broke my model because it looked like this when I opened it up. What? I figured the clipping was gone, but I couldn't understand how to clip things in this, so it gave me a much needed reality check that just because I knew how to draw and use my other programs doesn't mean that it's 100% going to translate into this, and that I needed to look into how to actually use the program before actually opening it up first. So after a couple of hours of being an iPad baby and learning to read, here's a rapid fire of my understanding of tools to give you an idea as well. First, I didn't use any of those, not once. Could be important or useful, but none of my tutorials mentioned it and I didn't want to stray too far. I only used the physics menu here. These are all the windows I used. Here you can find the user manual. This is supposed to animate models. This is used for regular animation. And this one I have no clue about. Edit levels break down the process. 3 is for general big scale edits, 2 is more narrowed down, and 1 is for fine tuning. I mostly did things in the second one because I was trying to save time. Texture atlas has got to be the most important one here, but it's only there basically at the end. This exports the model texture. Every single layer of your model will appear on this and needs to fit on a sheet without overlap. Otherwise, parts of the drawing will show up on other parts. You can either play Tetris or have the app auto-generate an atlas for you. A key thing to note here is that many big pages for atlas means that it will require more power to run and it might be laggy on slower PCs. Meshes overlay little points in your layers for you to manipulate. Manual mesh edit lets you make your own meshes instead of having the entity spawn it in, but I didn't use it much. Automatic mesh editor generates meshes for you, and I'd give my life for the standard mesh. This is my most used tool. This groups parts together to help create movement. This makes things rotate from a point. This is a regular mouse tool, lasso select tool, brush select tool. Only used this by accident when I'd press B for the more superior brush, and I kept forgetting to change the keybind. Create a shape you can manipulate with dots. Used to manipulate the dots on the meshes. The ones in the middle of the brush get directly moved, and the ones on the outside circle of the brush get dragged in with it. For sticking parts together so they're always connected no matter how you move things. And we're almost done, I promise. This is the deformer menu where you can see all the warp deformers that you create. This is the inspector menu that shows you all the details about layers and warps. This is the parameters, they're the actual animation keyframes. This is tool details, well, tool details. And this is the parts menu that shows you all your layers and all the deformers or warps you've added, and you can turn certain things off and on. And lastly, the project menu is if you've done goofed and forgot to add something to the model or need to redo something, and you can import additional things into the file and fix it. I haven't done this a single time, by the way, and you have no proof. And that's it for the rapid fire round. If you have any questions, comment them below and I'll try to answer them to the best of my understanding. Now though, with the newfound knowledge, we can see the endless possibilities just beyond the horizon. Obviously, the first thing we did was turn the app nocturnal and then go through and start clipping things. To do that, you need to grab the ID of the layer you want things clipped to and enter it in all the layers you want to clip down. Now it's impossible for me to pinpoint what I learned from who because I was constantly swapping between tutorials, but there's 2 playlists I'd recommend, Merrily Woofe and Chupico, which are 2 actual tutorials and will probably teach you way more than this video. For me though, I started off with adding a rotation deformer on the neck, and I gotta say, this was a big day for me because the dopamine rush I felt just from that little movement alone was insane. I called my friends to yap about it and I just kept rotating the head left and right. Anyway, so I struggled making the eye look like it's blinking. Looking back at it now, I wish I could just tell myself to use the path deformer instead and then go in with the brush for the finer details, but you get to watch me suffer instead, so I guess it's a win. Oh, I'm gonna play this in realish time so you can see I was not lying when I said I only ever used the brush by accident. To explain what I'm doing, we add two keyforms on the parameter IL open, where the first dot on 00 is eye closed and 1 is when we have the eye open. The idea is that you create the first and last frames and then the app fills in the rest. It's funny watching myself do this because I undo so much that it takes me all the way back to when I first opened the file, so I end up having to redo a lot of things. But hey, they do say that repetition is the key to learning, and oh boy, are things being repeated. I gave up on the eye for a bit and decided I'd organize my parameters instead and make them look pretty. I ended up following the advice of having 3 key points instead of 2 for the eye, so having an eye open, eye closed, and slightly more open frames. Although here we go right back to me struggling with the brush. Just use the line tool, dude! Either way, we get to a point that I like after a bit and move on to hiding everything that shouldn't be seen when the eye is closed and adjusting things like the eyelashes to be in the correct spot. But here, I can't help but bring up 2 things I wish I did differently. 1, I wish I didn't separate the side lash from the main lash. I've seen a lot of people do this and I'm sure it's useful, but to a person who had no clue what she was doing, it was just something I didn't understand how to make look right. And then 2, you can see that the lash at the bottom is filled with eye white, and that's just my personal stylistic choice. And to make that work, I just had the eye white have the same shape as the line art for the lashes. And when I was trying to make the eye blink, for example, you can see the gaps and it was just overall a little frustrating. I fixed it by having the lash whites on a separate layer, but I couldn't fix the actual eyeball white going wonky when she would blink. Thinking about it now, I think I could have used glue here, but it was literally the first couple hours of me working on this and I had no clue how to use it yet. I'll bring up my complaints as we go, but just to make sure that I don't forget any, I have a little list that I'll go through at the very end. But yeah, after the blinking, I got to do the iris XY movements, which are just the eye looking left and right for the X and up and down for the Y. Those were a lot easier, to be honest. I tried to move the pupil around the way it would generally do when you're looking in those directions, and I even got to try my hand at the physics menu for the first time. I did goof up though, and you can't see me actually going through the physics menu right now because I didn't record it. I forgot that I would have to do it in a separate tab. Whoops. But I did go back and forth to see how much bounce I wanted to add, what else I wanted to shake when you look around, and at this point I was so proud of myself. Was it looking professional? No. But did it have to? Also no. It was my first try and I was picking it up relatively easily and I thought I was on top of the world. You mean I can make my drawings blink? The power I hold! After finishing up with the general eye blink animation, I moved on to animate the highlights, iris, and the eyeball itself. I wanted it to have a little twinkle and a bounce, and to do that I employed one of the art animation fundamentals, the squish and squash. Or at least that's what I refer to it as. I used it to just wiggle everything around a teensy bit, and this added just that little bit of extra life into the animation that I loved. After finishing up with the exaggerated animation for the eyes, I moved on to shaping the brows. And shaping the brows literally was just like moving the eyebrow up and down and adding a little frown. After rigging one eye, I just copy-pasted it and reflected it to be the eye on the left, and ta-da! That's the eyes done! And so after rigging the eyes, I moved on to rigging the head, turning left and right. Now the tutorial I used suggested moving everything all together and then going in and fine-tuning everything else. And that's exactly what I did. I started off by moving the head to the left and then tried to animate it onto the right side as well. However, here comes the issue. It just wasn't looking right. But I couldn't Control-Z it because I took a gaming break in between and closed the program prior. I think I just looked up the wrong questions or couldn't explain what I was looking for well enough, but I couldn't find a fix for this. And with my 3 AM brain, I couldn't think of a better solution than moving it back piece by piece, which wasn't ideal. I fixed the hair and head, which didn't take too much effort, but the eyes looked like that would be extremely annoying. And the eye on the right I hadn't touched yet, so I thought I would do what I did earlier and just copy paste the eyes. That's fine, right? Nothing wrong with that. Well, I'm gonna let you be the judge of that. And so I decided to cry. I searched the internet far and wide to find a fix for this, but at around 5 AM I just gave up and went to bed defeated. The next day started and I was feeling very upset. I only had a day to finish the model, and at this point I had to redo everything all over again, and I really wasn't vibing with that idea. Instead, I ended up calling my partner to cry about it, and while speaking to him he reminded me that the program probably made an autosave that I could go and grab, which is what I did. But I was still feeling a lot of emotions, and mentally I had already given up on the model and on the challenge itself. So I just put the model away and just gave up on it. I didn't care anymore. I failed. Except, well, I did. I cared so much that even though I had technically failed the 7-day challenge, I kept going. The day after, I couldn't stop thinking about the model. It was day 8. this wasn't 7 days anymore, but I had put so much effort into the thing, I just can't quit now, can I? It just wouldn't be right. So on day 8, I went right back to the model. I tried to give the head rotations another go, but this time, I just went one thing at a time. I had everything else and just tried to change the head shape depending on where it was turned, but I was still feeling a bit confused about it, so I thought I'd give it a break and I would jump into the mouth parameters first instead. Here's where I realized that I messed up a little bit. Initially, I had a top lip and a bottom lip, which are the usual, as well as the mouthpieces. Well, I learned that the lip skin needs to be separated from the lip lines, as well as anything on top like the lipstick, as well as having the lip skin needing to be big enough to cover the inside of the mouth. None of my original mouth bits worked the way they were supposed to, so I went back to Clip Studio to redraw them and went right back to Life 2D. Initially, I just winged it, and then I used the actual resource that I linked in my last video. I have to be completely honest, I think this was one of my favorite parts. Was it looking exactly the way I wanted to? Again, no. Were the lines getting a bit too pixelated on parts? Yes. Was I still having a lot of fun? Surprisingly, yes. So to break it down, I had a mouth guide up on my other screen. If I remember right, it was this exact one by Chupaco, and I just tried to match up my mouth shapes at the specific keyframes as well as I could. This was quite honestly a pretty relaxing experience. After matching the mouth shapes, I just morphed the lip skin around the actual lips so the inside of the mouth that would otherwise be visible would be hidden. I also deleted the lipstick on top because I didn't know how I'd have to warp it to make it look good. And looking at it now, I just realized that I never gave the inside of the mouth parts a mesh. I just used the basic transform functions to warp them, but I guess it worked, so it can't be a problem, right? There's a few things I've had to go back and forth to change, but I'll do a final tally at the end. Even in later clips, you can see me changing a bunch of stuff. Regardless though, I was feeling proud again. I was enjoying the process, and looking at the physics menu was filling me with serotonin, so with joy and whimsy in my heart, I went to bed and continued working on it the next day. Day 9 felt like it was going to be my biggest challenge yet. After the last time I tried to do head rotations, I was a little bit traumatized and very nervous. I decided to approach it one thing at a time this time and hide everything else. Only focus on making one thing look good right at every angle, and that was the approach that worked best for me. Surprisingly, for just a doll in the face though, the nose was quite a bit of a struggle. I won't lie, the faces that were birthed in the process of trying to make this look normal still make me giggle a little bit, because if you pause at any moment in the middle of me trying to make the head angles work, it all looks goofy as hell. Now initially this model was going to enter the vault of things that are never going to see the light of day again, but that felt bad because I spent a lot of time on this. And it got me thinking to what I would have liked as a VTuber that was just starting out. When I initially started streaming, it was a little bit overwhelming with the amount of things you had to have, like panels and emotes and overlays and stuff, so I thought what I could do was make a one-stop shop for all of it combined. And so I spent another 10 hours on the model and made some emotes, some panels and overlays and so on. Now you can download her off of my coffee shop if you want, but yeah, I thought I'd make a VTuber starter pack because this community has been nothing but welcoming to me, and I just wanted to share the joy because I know that becoming a VTuber can cost a lot of money, so I thought I would make something that's more on the affordable end. So yeah, the link to that is in the description as well if you're interested. Back to the video though. I lied, it's not time to get back to the model. Now while I don't have much to say about the model, I would like to use this moment to say thank you. I tried to script this part as well, but it just didn't feel right. Nothing that I wrote down felt genuine, so excuse me if I end up yapping too much. But when I first made the video, I didn't expect it to reach double digits, let alone triple. I only really thought that maybe my 3 close friends would see it, but that would be it. But it's really cool to see that 300 people at the time of recording this at least just watched the video, and there are so many really nice comments on it as well, and it really motivated me to get this one out quicker. I just really wanted to say thank you for all the kindness I was shown. But other than that though, that's enough of the sap, so let's get back to yapping about the model. After doing the left, right, up and down motions, I also had to do the up, left and right, and then down, left and right. I messed with it for quite a bit before getting to a point I was happy with, after which I moved on to having her hair work with the angles, which I started off with the entirety of the hair, which was not the correct choice, so I ended up splitting it into the side hair separately and then the front bangs. Other than that though, I just repeated the same thing with all of the other things on the head, like the ears, the hair buns, the ribbons, and so on. I went back and forth to see what worked and what I liked best, and while some of those were difficult to get right, like the hair buns, I overall really enjoyed this part. It was quite repetitive, and once you get the hang of it, it is not as intimidating, so I really enjoyed this part as well. One of the things I did was make a shadow layer outside of the face and clip it onto the face, and this helped me create dimension when she would be looking left and right or up and down, and I think it worked really well. I also tried the technique where you have the face line between the neck and head disappear when the characters are looking to the sides, and I used an inverse clipping mask for that, which I learned from Chupuko. Rewatching the process, there are a few things that I would have fiddled with a little bit more to get the perfect angles, but I still wanted to finish this relatively quickly and I didn't want to get too hung up on the details. I was extremely happy with how things were turning out. After I was done with the angles, I had to attempt physics, aka adding bounce to the hair when looking left and right, as well as up and down. I used a bunch of warp deformers and temporary path deformers for this, and honestly it confused me a little bit. Chupuko introduced a lot of ways to add bounce to the hair, but I just couldn't figure them out, to be honest. It doesn't seem like a super difficult concept to grasp, but I wasn't sure if I was doing it properly. Basically, the idea is that I have the hair twist towards the right, and then towards the left, and then towards the right, but I kept forgetting which direction I did last, and I also wasn't sure if I was supposed to do all of it on the same physics effect, or if I was supposed to do them separately, or if I was supposed to do different directions on different key points, but I just kinda slacked. I didn't fully understand it, and I just went with it. As long as it looked okay, it was good in my book. This model was for fun and learning, and boy was I not learning. After the physics though, I was done with the hair, and with that, the most labor-intensive stuff was done. And now all I had to do was give the body some movement and a little bit of bounce, which I was going to do the next day. Now is the last day of me working on this. Yay! I had to look up some jello physics for this day because, you know, the features. But outside of that though, I was gonna mention again that because the models are only really visible waist up, I didn't care to give the model too much pizzazz off screen. So when it came to animating the body, I just gave it very simple animations. I hope they turned out fluid enough and looked okay. But yeah, you probably noticed that for a hot minute now, there's a warp deformer screen that's up that just won't go away, and that's because I'm a doofus and I messed up the recording and I have no way of fixing it now, sadly. As we're doing that, I'll quickly go over the differences between the free and paid versions of Life 2D Cubism. So the free version limits a lot of the things you can do to only a certain amount of times. For example, those warp deformers on the side, we can only have 50 of those. The parameters, only 30. The amount of parameters each warp or layer can be tied to, 2, which this isn't too big of a deal considering if you tie it to more than 2 layers, then it will likely start lagging your computer a bit when you're trying to run the model itself. Number of divisions you can have at most on a warp, 9 by 9. This can be a little bit annoying, especially if you're trying to deal with slightly more detailed models. The size of the artboard for extracting the model pieces, 2000 pixels, and how many atlases can you have? Only 1. Now this is a massive deal breaker. This would have made it impossible for me to not only work on this model in the way that I had, but even just extract it. When it comes to Vtuber models, they're usually at least 3000 pixels tall and have lots and lots of pieces. So fitting it all on one sheet that's not even the entire size of the model, it would be quite literally impossible, as well as it being quite annoying that a lot of the things are number limited. For me, the most frustrating one was the amount of parameters per layer, until I learned that I cannot export the model because there's literally not enough space on the atlas. So do I recommend using the free version to learn? Absolutely. It can help you get started and get the basics down if you're making a simple, small model just to learn the tools. If you want to make a more complicated model though, I would suggest either using the trial or getting the full subscription, because nothing would be more frustrating than going through to the end and rigging a model and then being unable to export it. Anyhow, this is the rigging review. It's not the most complicated, and I didn't add any toggles, and it's very much rushed, but I'm really proud of her regardless. And now here's what I'd do differently. Number 1, I would have lined the model perfectly in the middle. I didn't line her up perfectly, so when I was reflecting things from left to right, sometimes it would be a little off and then I'd have to manually correct things, and I was going an extra mile for something that I could have just avoided from the beginning. So when you're making your model, make sure that it is perfectly centered in the middle. 2, I would have done the eyes differently, but I already complained about that, so I'm not gonna repeat myself. 3, I would have made the inside of the mouth small enough to be covered up by the lip skin from the get-go. There was no reason I made it that big, and honestly I just constantly had to go through and cover it up in the rigging process. 4, her hair. It was looking a bit flat, and I wish I had just separated it a little bit more or added some extra layers or added extra hair pieces. I just thought it was looking too two-dimensional when she was looking around. 5, I would have made the neck the same width all the way through. For some reason, I decided I'd give her neck a little bulbous tip at the end, kind of like a doll head, but it made it very weird to rig around, so don't do that. 6. I wouldn't have spent time separating the fingers in the hand. I guess I would have preferred this if I was rigging a model in like a longer period of time, like if I had like a month or something, but because I was doing this in 7 days, it did not matter. I kept talking about how the only part that matters about a VTuber model is like the face, and then I went ahead and just drew hands. Why did I spend all that time on that? And then when I rigged, I didn't even care that all the layers for the hands were separated. I didn't really care to give the hands an animation, so I just wasted time drawing it. So I guess here's where I repeat a tip as well from like my previous video of like, know what you're going to be animating before you draw it, because you're gonna save yourself a lot of time. Number 7, I would have merged the hair shadows all together from the start. I was really confused for a bit why like the shadows were looking so silly, and you probably saw me go back and forth a little bit trying to fix it. Layer effects in Live 2D, they all only affect one layer at a time, which makes it a little bit awkward to have layers that overlap and are also in multiply mode, because then you get double the shadow, which you don't really want, so keep that in mind. 8. I would have made sure that anything I used to cover a certain bit of a layer, for example, was fully filled in. For example, for the hair cover in the middle, you can see like above this bang, the layer I used as like a fill-in for extra hair back there, it had little gaps in it, so it made it really awkward to rig, and then I had to just completely redo that bit altogether, so just do it from the start. 9. I would have added less bows. They were the bane of my existence. I hated them. I stopped rigging them at the end. 10. I would have been nicer to myself. This project took longer than I wanted to, and I kept beating myself up over it. But I also learned a new skill in like 10-11 days, and 2 of those I wasn't even working on it. I think we all need to hear a little reminder that we're doing well sometimes, so to be honest, let this be it for you. You're doing great. So that's the end of our little segment though. So now, it's actually been a couple of months since I've worked on this project. I started back at the end of August and finished it around mid-September. I was beating myself up over not doing it in 7 days, so I didn't want to make the videos for ages. Now, months later though, where am I now in terms of rigging? Not too far from where I was initially, to be honest. I have rigged since, and now I know that I can if I want to. For example, I made this silly little VTuber model with the free version for myself when I was streaming a few of my childhood games. I'm also very glad that I decided to make a 40s retro cartoon inspired one, because I didn't learn about the Atlas limit until after, and it would have been a pain if I had finished the entire model and just couldn't extract it. I mean, it was a close call as it was, and I had to play a lot of Tetris already. I'd love to say I've made a lot of professional looking models since, but I just haven't. It was never my goal. I just wanted to see if I could, and I, in fact, can. And now for the future, I know that I would be able to if I wanted to. I'm just not ready to shell out $100 to get an application for a year. With that though, thank you so much for watching. It's been really nice reading all the sweet comments on the last video, and I'm incredibly happy that I actually went through and decided to share my process with you. Let this be a testament that you can do hard things and to try things that you're afraid of. As always though, all the resources will be linked in the description, and on that note, I'm gonna go cook up something else now. So thank you, have a good night, and bye bye!